Over the last 1 or 2 months, I've done well over 15, maybe 20 ad account audits when it comes to Meta ads, Google ads, and this is not really a normal number for me. Most of the time, it's not this many in this amount of time. So let's go ahead and talk about what it is that I found in these ad accounts, because you might think, given the jump in a request for audits, that maybe it's an algorithm thing or something's changing or seasonality. But no, what I found was very, very human, and it's likely happening in your ad account as well. So in most cases, the one thing that I found was a problem with structures, campaign structures. They just would not make sense. I'm gonna give you an example of something that was done in an ad account I viewed just yesterday on an actual call. I did it live with the actual business owner, and I showed them what was going on in their ad account that's currently managed by, I believe, a freelancer. And yeah, it was kind of crazy. What I found when I went to the ad account was essentially two campaigns, right? And that's already a red flag, because their budget is not gigantic, but it's also not tiny. So that means that you can do some testing, you can have some sort of ad account structure without really kind of, giving your ad sets like $2 or $5 a day. You know what I mean? Like, that would be insane. But no, in this case, they definitely had the space to kind of create some sort of structure in the ad account, but they didn't. They had two campaigns, one of them being a catalog ad campaign, meaning they were showing ads of products from their e-commerce catalog. So essentially just a kind of carousel with products stuck on a white background. And that was it. That was all that was running in that campaign. The second campaign that they had was a campaign where they also had no audience settings, and they had a bunch of ads in there under one ad set, and everything was running at the same time. There was a bunch of like different angles and all this kind of stuff all bundled together. And this is a huge problem, because it becomes impossible to analyze what's actually going on. Even this business owner, when we spoke, she said, I don't feel like my business is growing. But whenever I speak to the actual freelancer, he tells me that everything is going fine. And even the results that I saw were amazing. Like the ROAS, the return on ad spend, was incredible. Everything looked great. But the problem is that that probably looked like that because they had a bunch of remarketing audiences bundled in together with cold audiences. What I'm saying is essentially that because there was no separation of new audiences versus ones that, for example, already went to the website, what was happening was Meta was very likely showing ads over and over again to the people who already purchased from the brand in the past and were likely to do so again. Also the same thing with people who were just coming to the websites. Also the same thing with people who were subscribed to her newsletter, who follow her on social media. I mean, all this kind of stuff was all bundled together with what was supposed to be new audiences. So they weren't really actively testing what's working with new audiences to attract new audiences, and therefore the growth wasn't happening, right? Now, one of the metrics that kind of hinted at this was the frequency. It was incredibly high, which means that, yeah, Meta's showing to the same people again and again and again. And so all of these numbers are incredibly inflated, and there's no way to tell what's working with new audiences versus older audiences, and you really have no idea what to do next. Huge, huge problem. The second thing, and maybe even more important, is the conversion tracking. And this is a very basic one for anybody working with digital advertising, but I think people who are not really in the space, they kind of skip over it sometimes because they don't understand the value of it, and they don't really understand how it works. So for example, for an e-commerce store, some of the conversions that you might have are like purchases. You can have initiate checkout. You could have add to cart, right? All these different things you can have in your ad account if you need to use them. But that doesn't mean that you always need to bundle them together. And this is also a huge problem because some of the ad accounts that I saw, a lot of these conversions were bundled together, even sometimes with a conversion called view item, which just means that somebody went, clicked on a product, viewed it, and that's pretty much it. That counts as a conversion. So that's really problematic because both Google and Meta, if they have the option to optimize for that, they are going to optimize for that. Now, I think on Meta, you set like one conversion, for example, per campaign, or per ad set. It's going to be a little bit easier because you set one conversion. I mean, and that's about it. Now it knows what it needs to do, so you can set purchase and kind of that's it. On Google, though, you essentially are able to, and the default thing is to set categories of conversions, right? Or it takes all of your primary conversions that you have in your ad accounts and it applies it to your campaign when you're optimizing for conversions, which means that if you have things like purchases and view item in the same ad account, they're both marked as primary, what's going to happen is Google is going to optimize for these conversions. And obviously, in most cases, it's going to say, you know what, it's far easier for me to get people to just view the product, so I'm going to focus on that. And guess what? I know that you as a business owner, you don't want that. You want sales. So that's why it's problematic. And the last thing is the lack of testing. And I know it's kind of like, textbook stuff, like, oh, you got to test your audiences, test this, test that, whatever. But it is incredibly important. And again, I see even, professionals, specialists, not even doing this in the ad accounts that they're managing for their clients. I don't know why, but it does happen. If it's a really small budget, I can understand not testing a lot because you can't due to the budget constraints. However, if you have a larger budget, there's really no excuse not to test. You can test different angles, you can test different offers, you can test different audience segments, all these different things that you can test. And the reason why you need to test is because you're going to find what's working and what's not working. And that's going to save you a lot of money or even potentially make you a lot of money. So it's really important to actually do that. If you don't know how to do it, I think that's a whole separate topic. So you can, look into that yourself. I can make a video on it in the future. If you want that, let me know in the comments. But yeah, it's a really important thing. Or you can even hire somebody to do it, like me, right? But the point is, don't just kind of leave it like, oh, I don't know how to do it or whatever. I'm just going to leave it. And if it's an agency or a freelancer in your ad account, and again, if you don't have a small budget, go ahead and ask them, what are you doing? What are you testing? What can we do next? Push them a little bit. And I think it's incredibly important to do that because, again, this is a very common thing that I saw in the ad accounts that I audited. And it was very problematic because then when somebody new comes in, they don't really have any information for what's working, what's not. And if you've been doing it for a year, that's a whole lot of data that you could have collected. So thank you for watching. I hope this was helpful. Hopefully it kind of gave you insight into what you can pay attention to. If you do have any questions about the process of the audit itself or any of the things I mentioned, go ahead and drop that into the comments below. But for now, thank you for watching.